So in this video, we're going to think a little bit about confidence-weighted multiple choice questions. And this session isn't designed necessarily as an introduction to confidence-weighted multiple choice questions. There's actually a really effective one by Andrew Woods from the Education People, and there's a link below this video. Though I do need to explore what they are a little bit before I can go into how we can carefully craft them. But I am going to assume that things like the testing effect and the new theory of disuse are familiar to anyone watching this video. So multiple choice questions typically feature a question and 3 or 4 possible answers. Confidence weighting shifts that format a little, and in an attempt to try and improve the gains we can get from their use. And that happens in a few ways. So this is an example taken from on the learning benefits of confidence-weighted testing, which is Spark and Robert and Elizabeth Bjork. And if you're so inclined, the references have a wealth of further reading that are really, really interesting. But this is an example taken from their text, from their study. What do you notice? So the first things I notice are that competitive alternatives have been chosen. Okay, just like regular multiple choice questions, the alternatives need to be competitive. And perhaps with the fact that we've got this triangular shape, our confidence-weighted multiple choice question, it may be a little bit easier because we're only really focusing on 2 competitive alternatives. Sometimes 4 competitive alternatives is a little bit sort of manufactured by the time you get to the third alternative. And also confidence is shown by the position of the response. Okay, so instead of having 3 vertices, we have alternatives which we can tick to show how confident we are in our response. Okay, those intermediary positions show how certain we are about our answer. Again, this is another example from the same paper. What do you notice here? I think the one thing that really stands out to me is that there is very little difference in a completely correct, fully confident answer and 1 or 2 spaces away from that correct answer. So I think you are stressing the fact, even if you don't score, because it might be a bit unmanageable to actually score in class like this, but you are emphasizing that it's almost as good to have an almost correct answer as it is to have it exactly spot on. There's very little difference in terms of the impact it's going to have on our children. So this is an example taken again from Andrew Woods, and I think it's a fantastic question. And the reason it's fantastic is because of the way the alternatives have been chosen. Okay, so we've got our ratio, and we can very easily separate the pupils who've chosen incorrect responses into 2 groups. For instance, if they choose 2 9ths, then it's very likely they just haven't read the question. Whereas if they choose 2 7ths, then actually their understanding of ratio and proportion is a little bit skewed. And so you've got one group of children who will need sort of some serious intervention on the concept at hand. And you've got others who maybe if you point them in the right direction in terms of reading the question, then they'll be able to access it next time round. Okay, but I think it's always important to consider why have these alternatives been chosen, because they will make life easier for us in terms of the things that we can learn about our pupils when they answer the questions. Okay, and we can see the varying levels of certainty based on where they would tick the correct answer. And in terms of the evidence, I think multiple studies have shown that confidence-weighted multiple choice questions can trigger enhanced retrieval gains. Multiple choice questions themselves are, probably one of the most effective ways to give pupils opportunities to think and retrieve and to consider the validity of their answers. But you can see here, confidence-weighted multiple choice questions sort of outperform them quite generally. And for me, the important thing is that we're not only thinking about the correct answer, but why the alternatives are incorrect. Some sort of form of metacognition. And in this particular study, participants were tested on a random passage. So in my mind, I'm imagining, well, what's going to be possible if the pupils are familiar with well-sequenced content? The gains may even be greater still. And in terms of crafting these multiple choice questions, there are a few things we can do. Yeah, so I think we begin with the question, the learning or knowledge we wish to be retrieved, and then we identify the correct answer, and then we decide on competitive alternatives or distractors. Okay, and so I've gone for multiples of 90 that are often confused by pupils in this situation, and I'll be able to see exactly who understands exactly what the question's asking and who has gone astray. Okay, and it's not going to be perfect, but in my mind, these are the options that I would choose. And the reason I would do that is because I can use exactly the same solutions, maybe days or weeks later, to invoke the memories that were assembled during the previous incarnation. So in the previous question, we were considering some adjacent angles around a point, and 180 degrees was one of the incorrect answers. And so by asking the pupils to think about why that was incorrect, hopefully when it comes time to retrieve it here, they'll have thought about that and they'll have a much more durable memory that they can draw upon. Okay. And I think knowing when this is possible is the skill, because some opportunities are really clear and some are less clear. So where do I think it's possible? I think when the question is the same and something's different, there are certain areas that lend themselves to this a lot more readily. Okay. So we got shape, classification and properties, measures, averages, rounding, comparing decimals, area, perimeter, and volume, and angles. Okay, and I'm going to give you an example from area, perimeter, and volume. And so the question is, what is the area of the square? I've got my three options, three common errors, possible misconceptions, and then in this next question, the same model is used, same representation, but actually I've asked a totally different question. So we've got that crossover between the answers. Why is one right and one's wrong? And so we're asking pupils to think about why exactly things are happening the way they are. Okay? Now, one thing that doesn't come across in the research, but I think is worth exploring, is questions where you've got errors of calculation. Okay? Like I said, there's no evidence to suggest this type of question can help pupils as well as the others, but that may be because we haven't really looked. Okay? And so in this example, we can see common misconceptions, common errors that pupils make, and we get a lot of information from it. And I think by asking the pupils to think about why these errors have been made, then we almost prepare them for not making those errors themselves. And certainly if they get a similar question with a similar error in the future, they'll be able to spot that as to the reason why. Okay. And I think to make effective use, okay, we need to consider some things, because the study showed that participants were very poor at realizing the impact this had, and they didn't even change their strategy when they've been told in between questions about what they could do. And I think self-reporting is normally quite poor, because we don't really understand how we learn ever. And so the idea is that pupils are able to transfer this sort of way of working, this way of thinking about why things are the way they are, to a range of question types. Okay. And I think we do this by modeling their use. And that includes choosing intermediary positions and exploring the reasons alternatives are incorrect. Okay. And so we are literally drawing our pupils' attention to this process, modeling it, and then giving them opportunities to rehearse it. Okay. Just like anything we do, we're almost training them to think in this way, because I think that's where we get the benefits from this type of question. We include them in our retrieval practice opportunities. We use them at the end of a sequence or when we're recapping prerequisite material. Okay, I think these are all great places to put these types of questions, but there is no one correct answer. Okay, we can choose to explore them how we want. We've got an idea that they are a beneficial tool that we can use in the classroom, but there is no 100% this is how you must use them. But I would strongly recommend modeling their use and drawing attention to the properties that they draw out, that we really want our pupils to be doing, and that is thinking about why things are incorrect and about choosing intermediary positions, because they will still get a gain, possibly from hypercorrection when they realize, oh, I was very wrong, or I wasn't too far away. Okay. And I think most importantly, you'll notice that this question that I used was taken from the White Rose on diagnosticquestions.com. There's no point in reinventing the wheel when people have put a lot of time and effort into thinking about multiple choice questions. All we need to do is change the format, maybe decide which distractors are most pertinent to our pupils, and then build from there. Okay, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. So I'd love to hear about how, if you try these in your class, and how it goes. And then maybe we can share some in the future. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, and then you can get updated on when new videos are released.